Welcome to Castle Hill, a week which has seen the start of changes in lockdown rules and regulations, when some of you, as I have been, at the barbers or hairdressers perhaps, and starting to enjoy some of the freedom that has been allowed to us. That obviously has implications for the church, and I'll come back to that later. But let's gather for worship. Let's take a moment just to reflect. Holy God, holy and loving God, in the ebb and flow of life, where things feel fluid, a liminal place where change happens, may we pause, hold breath, and know a presence beyond all uncertainty. Holy and loving God, when the sand feels unsure and the footprints invite us to follow, may we stand in the shadow of the Galilean and find our place beside the one who journeys with us always through all things. Holy and loving God, may we centre ourselves and find ourselves in you. So be it. I'd like to take you to the familiar story of Joseph in the Old Testament. It's a long story to read in the Bible. If you'd like to refresh your memory, could I suggest you read in particular Genesis chapter 45 verses 1 to 18. But let's reflect on the relevance of this story for today. For we've got great stories to tell as part of our faith. Stories that are thousands of years old, yet still they can be as fresh as the first day they were told. But who listens to them now? Who pays attention to them unless they entertain like a Hollywood blockbuster? Perhaps we tell our stories in the wrong way today, and they've ended up having little real value except to entertain. Yet deep down we know there is nothing childlike or glossy about the dysfunction, injustice, revenge, prejudice of God's chosen ones, and the grace that changes them. Such themes appear in not just the story of Joseph, but in so many of our faith stories. These stories once shaped the values of the world, but they seem to have lost that value. They simply come across as morality tales, rather than as the mirror they can be in our human condition and the hope they should bring. And this story of Joseph is a case in point. It's a story I would like to tell to Mr. Putin and Mr. Trump, to every kind of terrorist, to those who turn first to violence to solve their problems, and to all those who come to prominence through the division of our world today. It doesn't take much wisdom or insight to strip the value or humanity out of people, to treat them as less valuable than your own prejudices. Speaking devisely, creating division is all too easy. Wisdom is found in the folk who can live and lead without being divisive, recognizing instead the value of others, regardless of who they are, or what they believe, or what they have done. Which is why I want to give you again Joseph's story, because right there is one of the great examples in leadership. Joseph was thrown into a pit, sold into Egypt, all but forgotten by his brothers, who conspired and then profited by what they did to him. And yet, at the very moment when the tables are turned, Joseph chooses to bring them back together. He had a choice. He could win the day by keeping the divisions going and easily amplify those divisions by taking revenge, just as seems to be the underlying tone of much of where we are in the world at the moment. A passive-aggressive kind of revenge on immigrants. One country not respecting another through trade or hacking medical research to win COVID-19 vaccine first. Different prejudices battling for power, and the forgotten majority in the middle. East against West in spying and influencing elections. This is so costly and so dangerous because it has no natural stopping point. You strip the value out of another and you divide. Instead of the path to revenge, though, Joseph takes a different path. And it's the first recorded example of it in human literature. Joseph forgives. Well, the word of forgiveness is there in the Bible before this Joseph story, but each example's more about appeasement of anger. Jacob and Esau, Laban and Abraham, each simply accepts an excuse and there's a restless peace, always teetering on the brink of revenge or the possibility of revenge. Here is something different. Joseph forgoes all thought of revenge. Forgiveness means you fundamentally affirm the worth of the other person. You say to each and every one, you have value, you are important. Life would be less without you. When you see the world like that, and people in the world like that, then revenge is not possible. And that is what brings Joseph's family back together. That moment, the first moment in literature that recognises others' value beyond what they have done or believe or are in the world, and opts against personal revenge. That's a story for a white supremacist, an anti-Semite, a political opponent, and for each one of us today called to be neighbour to others, no matter who they are. And so it is a story to tell today, not as some mega episode of long lost families, but a faith story that holds up a mirror to what we can be like and becomes a story that can change the world again. It's a story that brings back together again through Joseph's unique style of leadership. Would that we had more leaders like that today. But it isn't the only story of that. It's the first. But once the story starts being told in our faith, they start coming along more often until we meet it right at the heart of our salvation story. Remember Jesus at the table with his disciples, and he breaks bread with them, reflecting on the brokenness and revenge the world wants to take on love, and what the world will do to him. But Jesus doesn't return the revenge. The whole story is quite the opposite. It's a forgiveness story. And what does he say? Do this in remembrance of me. Remember me. Bring the pieces back together. This is what forgiveness does and revenge doesn't. Remember. Bring the body back together again. It's there, right in the central moment of our faith story. remember. Bring the pieces back together. Let there not be division. Let there not be revenge in our community, whatever that community is. These are too easy an approach to do. Remember. Bring the broken pieces of the body back together. This is to be the story for our world and all leadership today. This is a story for our community and our church today. Lay aside and leave behind the divisions of the old normal as we face a new normal. May we recreate one community that is diverse and different and wonderfully special when we can accept each other as we are. God willing, we shall remember in worship in September with the celebration of communion. With God's help and guidance, we need to remember right now and from now on. We dare not go back to old ways. God wants us to work together to prepare a better future for all God's people. Let us set out on that journey, even though the pace may be slower to start with than we might like. We can journey together with God. Together. Remember that. This week we've been making a lot of plans ahead for the opening up of worship in the Church of Scotland. We've received no less than 57 pages of instructions just last night about what that will mean for us in these changing and uncertain times. The procedure ahead will take longer and be more difficult than we anticipated. But I would ask you to listen to this word from God as perhaps a way we should look ahead from the book of Isaiah, chapter 58. Is this not the worship that I choose? To loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the thongs of the yoke, and let the oppressed go free, and to break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, and to bring the homeless poor into your house? When you see the naked, to cover them, and not to hide yourself from your own kin. I'd like to share with you this reflection on that. Going back, what does that entail? Is it a regression? Is it back to old habits and comforting practices? Is it a retreat back to safe spaces and familiar patterns? Is it a withdrawal back to sanctuaries where we can hide, safely entrenched behind defensive walls built up over generations? Going back. Is it a comforting default, or is it moving forward? Moving forward with God into the future that God is revealing. Discerning the places where God lives and walks and invites us to be partners, listening and connecting, learning and discovering who we are called to be in the wake of a pandemic, with the potential for deploying the reset function that, frankly, is already in progress? Or is it moving forward into the promise of the unknown, where the rules of engagement are still being worked out where we cannot rely on the old paths that we know, but on the one who makes all things new? Are we going to be falling back, or are we going to be facing forward on our journey? Which will it be? I truly believe there can only be one choice: going forward with God, unafraid, into all the unknown that will hold. So be it. May you find yourself on the way, in the very place you are. May you find the opportunity for grace among the people you know. May you hear the story of renewal amid the chat of every day. And may you know the God of life beside you, within you, whoever you are. Live in peace. Receive and share the blessing of God, our Creator, companion and comforter, in the week that awaits. May we show God's love wherever we are. Amen.